What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 835. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources. Joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, we have to say goodbye to Avatar: The Last Airbender today.
It's true, but they did put up the powered cube, so I can't
they
say
softened the blow.
I'm that disappointed.
And we're actually going to talk about both of those things. We're going to talk a little bit about the powered cube up top, and then we're going to do this sunset show for Avatar: The Last Airbender. First, we want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/limited resources if you'd like to support us over there. We also want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. If you need to protect your cards, your decks, and or your collection, Ultimate Guard has the best stuff in the business. It's very well designed. They use premium materials. And once you get an Ultimate Guard product in your hands, you're going to go, oh, okay, I get what he's talking about. This is some really nice stuff. You can check out their full line of products at ultimateguard.com, and you can pick up one of any of their stuff from your favorite online retailer or local game store. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. We've got a Patreon question of the week from Rob, who says, what are you doing in-game and post-game to update your evaluations of cards, especially for cards on the extreme, ones you thought were good that are not, or ones that you thought were bad but are good or decent? What about overcoming personal bias towards cards, ones that you really like or dislike but end up being better or worse? I'll say, Rob, we've gotten pretty good at card evaluations to the point that, most of the time we're pretty close. And the times when we're not, it usually involves Luis and I hedging a bit, going, I'm skeptical. I'm going to start off assuming that this card isn't very good, but I'm kind of willing to be proven wrong by my opponents. Or one that's just really difficult to nail down. Those ones I come in and I don't go, I know that card sucks. Right. I'm never having that mentality where I'm like, that card's terrible. I'm not going to play it. It's bad. And then it's like somehow it ended up being good. Basically, every time a card that I'm skeptical of, but then does end up being good, I had it in my mind that like there's an escape hatch here where this card actually might be all right if the format does it. And it goes the other way too. Some cards that I think are really good, usually I at least have the idea that, if this format's fast, that thing won't work. It's pretty rare that we get completely blindsided these days. That being said, it's a constant process, both in game and out of game. The out of game usually involves other people like me running opinions or asking for opinions from like Luis and Paul, our friend Jay, Adam. I'll run. Hey, what do you think about, how's this card been for you? Where are you at on this card? Is it up from beginning, down? Is it, that kind of thing? Out of game. In game, it's just constant data collection. It's just, does this card match up well in this matchup against the type of creatures that you tend to see, against the type of strategies that you tend to see, and how, and also just the very basic, like, has it impressed me? Has it been good? Has it felt like a strong performer or a card that's struggling to kind of find its way? What about you, Luis? I'm sure you're doing similar, where you're just like constantly evaluating.
Yeah. You for me, a lot of it is like you end up on like what the vibes are of the card, where like after a while, it's like, I'll just have cards that I want to pick and play and cards that I don't. I just get a good sense for that. And there's not really like that scientific of a method for it. It's more just like, I've had a bunch of good experiences or bad experiences with a specific card, and I end up getting a good sense for that. That's, again, if I'm playing a lot. The other thing that I'll do is I will take a look at 17 lands and look for cards that have a pretty big delta between how good I think they are and how good that 17 lands thinks they are, because that's always interesting to try to figure out. It doesn't mean necessarily that I'm right or wrong. Probably more likely that I'm wrong, but there have been some cards that just don't get particularly high or don't have a high win rate that I find to be pretty good, and vice versa.
Totally. And that's a good substitute or addition to bouncing it off of like trusted players that 17 lands does give you some of that. One of the interesting things that I do once the data is kind of well-rounded, we've had the set for a little while and things have kind of settled down, because you do need a bigger data set for this. But I'm not sure if you do this, Luis, but I will look at a card or an archetype And I kind of have I'm like, this thing's just been doing really well for me. And I'll filter by top players, and I'll see, does this, is the experience that I'm having, does it line up with what the top players are doing, more in the format? Like a really good example, we'll talk about the archetypes when we get into the Sunset show, but one archetype that I've had a lot of success with and really feel comfortable in is blue black, which is a pretty good archetype, overall. Like it's in the upper quadrant, right? It's good. But if you look at top players, blue black's one of the best, like it's either the best or second best deck. And it's like, okay, so I'm finding something here that the very good players are finding as well. And that is another way that you can kind of compare and contrast, because yeah, I mean, it is true, that there are cards that are more difficult to play, or that are strategies that are more difficult to deploy, that if you put it on the big group of 17 lands players, which by the way already represents a not top players, but an upper level of player, compared to the whole population. You can see that simply because the average win rate is usually around 55% of 17 lands users. And of course, of the population in general, it would be 50%, right? So you already are kind of ahead on that. But then if you look at the top players of the 17 lands players, you're getting into some pretty, those are some high win rates there. So that's another way that you can compare and contrast. We've always talked a long time on the show about asking players who are better than you, right, for their opinion as well, and not just players that are at your level or below it. And that's a kind of a shortcut way to do that. Thanks for the question, Rob. We appreciate it. Okay, we've got a couple of actually cube-related things to talk about here, Luis. The first one is that the Powered Cube is back on Arena. So you can play it right now. I'm already like 5 drafts deep. And they put out an article, I'll put a link to it in the show notes, that described kind of, because we had the first big run, right, has happened. And one of the huge takeaways that we talked about on the show was the domination of Boros in the format. And they talked about that, the articles by Zach Barash. And and so, they know, the title of the little section was "Let's Talk About Boros," right? It was like, all right, we get it. And they have said that they are going to try to shift. They're going to take away a few of the cards that they feel are ripe for the picking, let's say, not necessarily just going for the best of the best, but kind of, massaging some of those early curve numbers. And then also perhaps taking a few of the slots that would be normally for like a Boros aggressive deck, and while keeping the same colors, maybe putting some cards in for some other archetypes there. They also put out they're calling it the Powered Cube 2.0 list. So you can see it. They strangely didn't put a change log up. Like they didn't just put a list of what they took out versus what they put in, which is, for people that draft a lot, that's kind of the thing, what cards am I not going to be able to go for anymore? And then what toys did I get? You of course could figure that out by, subtraction here, but that's kind of a big pain. So hopefully they'll include that in future ones. And then Luis, the last thing that they mentioned is that, they wanted to keep a real bare bones cube to start off with, but now they have opened it up to Universes Beyond, and they started with the Lord of the Rings set. So they took some cards from that.
Yeah, I think that adding the Lord of the Rings cards was pretty nice, because that Bowmasters, the One Ring, the Land Cyclers, they all play really well. Mm-hmm. So I really like doing that. I mean, honestly, it felt like they did a lot of the stuff that I was hoping they would. I made a video about it, and, chief among it was like, yeah, swap out some of the red and white cards for other red and white cards, just not Boros specific ones. Mm-hmm. Give a little support to the non-Boros decks, add in Universes Beyond stuff. So I'm glad they made the changes. And I'm probably about 7 or 8 drafts in, and I have not felt that Boros is near the same level of dominance.
I felt the same way. I'm kind of sad because I had my strategy, last cube all mapped out. I was drafting a lot of Jeskai with a lot of Flage and Lightning Helixes and stuff like that. And now that strategy is a lot worse because you just don't run into Boros every third match. So anyway, the Arena Power Cube is back up, maybe to soften the blow a bit on the Last Airbender leaving us, and you can draft it now. The other thing I wanted to mention is also cube related, which is the Magic Online Champions Showcase, which is kind of an interesting tournament. I'm actually doing coverage for it on Saturday with Reed Duke and Ely Cassis. And it's a really, I'll put a link to they're going to put it up it's going to be on YouTube where you can watch it. And it's a cool tournament. There's 8 players and they do a vintage cube draft on Magic Online. And for showing up in the first round, in other words, for qualifying, you get $500. And then it goes like 1,000, 2,000, and then 4,000 for the winner of that cube. That person also secures a seat in the final of the event because the other half of the event is modern in the same 8-player format. So again, $500 for sitting down. So basically if you qualify for this thing, you get $1,000 bare minimum. And then it goes 1,000, 2,000, 4,000. And even if you're already the other player who won the cube draft, you can win that out. And then you get to the 4,000 and you get the grand prize because you don't even have to play the final because you'd be playing against yourself. But theoretically, that's not likely to happen. And we'll get 2 players playing for the final as well. So anyway, anytime we get to see vintage cube played for stakes, I'm in. And that was a big part of the reason that I wanted to do coverage for this thing. But again, I put a link in the show notes for that. Luis, does that tempt you at all? Like you gotta want to play the vintage cube for thousands.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really fun. The closest I ever got to qualifying for the Mox was actually in Cube. They did a Cube sealed, and I lost in the finals to Oliver too. And,
I remember that.
The problem is I just can't play 10-hour tournaments on Saturdays and Sundays. That's just really not where I'm at anymore. So I've mostly given up on on trying to qualify for the Mox. If it happened, it'd be awesome. It sounds really cool, but yeah, it's not.
Life has seasons, Luis, and this is not the season of all weekend tournaments for you, though. I do predict that season will change at some point, and he'll be back in the streets trying to qualify for random vintage cube events online. Anyway, again, I'll put a link in the show notes for that. Okay, let's get to the Sunset Show. We should do our last Crack-A-Pack, Luis. I forgot to have Jeff grab that for us. Maybe he could do that in the background, and we'll fire it off when he gets that ready. But we usually kind of cruise through those. But it's nostalgic almost to like open up one last Crack-A-Pack and see if we get something sweet. Yeah, Jeff says he'll have one in a few minutes for us because he is producer Jeff. Let's see. But we can jump into our sunset here. So first up, if you could summarize the set in one sentence, what would it be?
For me, it was allies teaching lessons because those were the decks that were doing the thing.
It was, and you can guess at what the best deck was based on that because it kind of was both. For me, it was one of the best top to bottom sets we've had. I'm thinking in terms of well-rounded, all around design, gameplay, flavor, artwork, just every metric that you would put a modern Magic set under. This thing just checked the box. I was really, really impressed with Avatar: The Last Airbender in every metric. To me, it is a shining example of not only what a Magic set should be, but definitely what a Universes Beyond set should be. Again, I've mentioned it on the show before, but Luis kind of pushed me into watching the show. He said, you should watch it. You should watch it. Okay, fine. And I did. I watched all 3 seasons of it. Many of it while I was playing the set as it was coming out, which was kind of an interesting experience too. And that gave me, that overall viewpoint on it, not just from limited gameplay, not just from card design, not just mechanics and that kind of stuff, but even stretching into the flavor and the translation of one IP into Magic. Overall, I'm kind of blown away by it. I know that Final Fantasy also stands as a similar model, and I think that this is right there with it. To me, if I worked at Wizards of the Coast and I was going to do a Universes Beyond set, I would point to this one because I don't know. I might be wrong about this because I do have a little bit of a hard time kind of seeing the whole landscape, but it did feel also like Final Fantasy. It was such a bigger more relevant to the Magic audience, average Magic player IP, that it was a little bit more primed, for mega success. Not to take anything away, they obviously crushed that delivery and everything. But this one, I think the difficulty level was a little harder. Yes, there's a lot of people that play Magic that have watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, but there's also a lot that haven't. And it's not a game, right? Those things are very, very adjacent. When it's like a game and another game, it's like, well, you're already a gamer, you're probably going to watch it. So I feel like this one to me would be the gold standard, especially for one that wasn't as big of an IP, as you might get like Final Fantasy was. Do you want to do the Cracker Pack now, Luis? We've got it.
Yeah, let's crack some packs.
Okay, let me just bring this up here. God, I hope just something like, Jeff, don't let us down. Like, we just need something cool to open.
It doesn't have to be an Invasion Submersible, but like something, something would be happy first pick.
Yeah, give me something to grab onto here. All right, here we go. First card up is a foil Aang's Journey. I did play Aang's Journey. It made the cut every once in a while.
Yeah, I think one of the things that disappointed me a little for Avatar was that the Shrine / 5-color deck I don't feel was particularly good. Yeah, that wasn't just a thing you should be doing.
Absolutely. But this would have been a piece of it. Next up is Sandbender's Storm. That's the destroy a creature with power 4 or greater.
Yeah, not a card I'm that interested in.
Nope. Next one I am, though. Firebending Lesson. This ended up being premium. I mean, it was easy to see how good this card was being as flexible as it is. I mean, going from 2 damage to 5 kind of means you can kill anything at the point at which it's relevant. But then they also made it a lesson, and that just pushed this thing over the top.
Yeah, I think that it was one of the cards where it's like there's no upper limit to how many you want. You'll just take all the ones you can get, and they'll always be excellent.
Azula Always Lies. It kind of flopped a bit, but I mean, that is, that is a combat trick that makes it very difficult to lose that combat. You fire off an Azula Always Lies post blocks, and you're usually getting the job done with that card. But it just didn't really have room.
It also, as it became very clear, lessons on non-teamer cards, it just wasn't that much of a big deal. Like it wasn't getting a lot of extra points, which was fine. But a lot of the teamer colored cards were actually getting, like, that's what got them across the line, is the fact that they were also a lesson. That didn't really factor in too much here.
It's kind of funny, right? Because like when you look at Firebending Lesson and our next card, Waterbending Lesson, the fact that their lessons were so important, and yet with the black cards, it was almost a write-off, right? Like it was hard to find a situation where it mattered that card was a lesson. But yeah, Waterbending Lesson's next. I mean, very solid draw spell. One thing that surprised me about the card is that very often I would discard to it and try to keep my mana up or whatever to cast something that I had just drawn. It was much more common for me to do that than I would have anticipated.
Yeah, I think that they pulled off the whole lesson thing really well.
Earthbending Lesson. Well, let's put a wrench in those works, because this one did not end up being very good. This is the green one that Earthbends for.
I specifically liked it in Iroh Grand Lotus decks as a way to, because what would often happen is all the good lessons were pretty much removal, and you didn't want to be in a spot where you had, like, say 8 mana or 9 mana, and you're like, okay, I can play Iroh, kill their creature, but then I've got a bunch more lessons that are removal in the graveyard. They don't have any more creatures. I just have to pass, and then if they kill Iroh, I don't get much. I liked having 1 or 2 Earthbending lessons in those decks, because then you just fire off an Earthbending lesson, and
that makes sense.
You end up in a spot where you got a bunch of value before the Iroh left the field. But yes, not a card you play a ton of.
How to Start a Riot. I did hate losing to this. I guess I could put this. I have a different card for it, but this was definitely a card that this could be the runner-up for me for the card I never win with but lose to. This is the one that gives a creature menace, and then everything gets +2/+0.
Yeah,
I never play this card.
The deck that I was most disappointed didn't show up, I think, with any regularity was the kind of aggressive blue-red lessons Fire Nation Cadets deck. where How to Start a Riot would be good, and I wasn't able to put that together very often.
No, and this was one of the disappointing lessons, to have to put into a deck. Next is Zhang's Deserters. This is part of a long line of white commons that are somewhat replaceable. There's better ones and worse ones, but they say the word ally on them and they cost 2 mana or 3 mana and you're just kind of in. They all just made the cut most of the time, and Deserters was one of those. Good with airbending too.
Yeah, the punishment for not having enough 2s was high enough that I think you had to take these a little higher than maybe it would warrant, but they ended up playing fine.
They did. I mean, 2 mana 2/3 on turn 2 was just fine most of the time.
Yeah, and then late in the game, sometimes you could push like a thing through because you're able to target like your 2/3 when they have a 3/3 out, that sort of thing.
Right. Meteor Sword is our first uncommon. This card I did try to make work a bit. It goes against itself a little bit. The 7 mana is a lot, but destroying any permanent, that does get you something back. And, the equipment was relevant. Equip 3 for +3/+3 is a good deal. It turns literally any creature into a viable threat or a good blocker. And at that point in the game, you might even be able to do both. But it did feel like the two halves of this card, if you will, were just a little too different from each other, right? Like a clunky removal spell, and then just like it kind of felt random, the equipment. Like, I don't know, if you had a lifelinker, it was a huge difference, right? But it just felt like I would end up putting this on some creature that could attack, a messenger hawk or something that was left over, and it did make it good, but it wasn't really what I needed. Like, I was looking for inevitability more than anything at that stage of the game. And then it was like, well, do I really need to pay 7 mana to blow up a permanent? And the answer is kind of no.
No, I thought that the card's interesting. I did like how it played. I liked it more in sealed or in like a controlling deck, especially if you did have like a lifelink, like you mentioned. So it was a cool card. Not a cool take over firebending lesson, but it had some games where it was pretty good. But it was a bit slow for sure.
I see it as just like so close to being like really cool. Next, all right, Iroh's Demonstration. This card's a beating. Okay.
Yeah, this is a great card.
Yeah, this is one I would take over Firebending Lesson.
Yeah, because it acted as Firebending Lesson in the way that you needed it to for 2 mana instead of 1, but also sometimes 2 instead of 5. But it also just every now and then you're like, okay, I can kill your 3 tokens with this sweep, and like that was pretty good.
I remember one time I was playing one where I was playing a tokens deck, and I had to step away from my computer, and I came back and all my tokens were gone, and I'm just like, Iroh's Demonstration. Like, it had to be that. Next, this is a good one. Earth Kingdom Jailer. Well, you got a nice pack here, Jeff. We got Firebending Lesson, Demonstration, Earth Kingdom Jailer. These are some good this is some good stuff. I would take this card actually over the Iroh's Demonstration. Where are you at on the Earth Kingdom?
Yeah, you're supposed to take the Jailer. I think it's just it goes into a better deck. I think it is better to start on white than in red. Just white more reliably is better, and it's just a really powerful card.
Next up is Zhao the Moon Slayer, which is really 2 mana for a 2/2 menace in red that with no relevant creature type. This is the one that you could put a consequence counter on him for 7 mana and it would make non-basic lands into mountains. I almost had this be relevant, Luis. I was 1 mana away from bricking my opponent's Abandoned Air Temple with this. And instead I missed the land drop and then they activated it and killed me. But I was like, wow, I almost could make this relevant, but alas, no. You just really needed to be an aggressive red deck to want to play Zhao because it's a 2/2 menace for 2, which isn't that bad of a deal, but with really no synergies going on, it still was, it was kind of asking a lot of you.
Yeah, I think it's a neat card, but yeah, it mostly was just a 2/2 menace for 2, which some decks did want, I guess, but it wasn't really.
All right, our rare is cool, actually. This is a little bit of a curveball here. It's Earthbender Ascension. That's the green one.
Less a curveball and more, right? We just opened a bomb.
Well, but it's green, right? Like I would not prefer to start in green, but I mean, I would obviously take.
But this card is just so good that I mean, this card has been kind of interesting in Cube too. But you can make your strip mine or your fetch land into a 2/2 and then sack it, which is cool,
and get it back.
And get it right back. Cool. But Yeah, I would say Earthbender Ascension is just unbelievably good. So I would be happy to take it.
All right. So we're gonna leave Avatar: The Last Airbender on a bomb. Earthbender Ascension, not too bad. Okay, back to the regularly scheduled programming here. What ended up being the best archetypes? A lot of this was blue related. Blue ended up being really, really strong colors. So blue, white, blue, red, blue, black, all on the list. But red, white was really good, and even green, white. And the through line here is that blue and white were really good.
Right. I think it's mostly that blue and white were really good. Black was, I think, the weakest color. And then red and green were good when paired with the good colors, basically.
Exactly. There was enough support, but you really did. I always preferred to be in white or blue on some level. And, especially if that would be your primary color. The reason also that did work is that they were not just the good cards, but they went deep. You were getting, cards like Zhang Zhang's Deserters, for example, pretty far down the list on white. Like, there's a big chunk of playable creatures there, so that even if you were fighting somebody with them, you could at least pick up that level of card. And, that often was better than what the other colors put forth. What cards were we most wrong about during the set review, or that surprised us one way or the other? There was a few that kind of jumped out, Luis.
Yeah, I think a big one for me that I would keep thinking about actually was Watery Grasp, which, the enchantment that the enchanted creature doesn't untap, and you can pay 5 and Waterbend to shuffle it back in. And it's not that we thought the card was terrible or that the card is amazing, but it was very good. It ended up just basically being removal, and I feel like we were a little under on it based on how good it ended up playing out.
For sure. And, there was a couple of cards that I'm still kind of surprised. One of them is Rowdy Snowballers. We've seen that effect over time. And, especially because early on, remember, somehow Wizards thought that blue-white was a Flyers deck. Like that they have cards seeded for
the uncommon as like a flying payoff
right.
and stuff.
And
like
we're
that.
going off of the what's it called? The signpost uncommons, which leads you in that direction. And, it really wasn't. It was more of an allies lessons kind of thing, but with some flyers thrown in there. And, Rowdy Snowballers is an ally and is a major speed bump for a deck like a Flyers deck. And even I thought it would be just fine regardless. And it's really mediocre. Like it just was very mid and not something that you wanted. That still kind of surprises me. And then the other one, I've never been so disappointed. Sparring Dummy.
Yeah, this looked like one that would like let you draw some cards and do some cool stuff, and it just really wasn't good enough.
One of the biggest disappointments. I think I gave it a B. Maybe we both did. Like that card just looked like the classic.
Obviously, like a D.
Yeah, right. And it just looks like the classic. Play it. It generates value for you over time and is a blocker and whatever. And it ended up being really pretty bad. What about Faded Firepower?
Yeah, this was an interesting one where, again, it didn't end up being like the best card ever, but this is the X red enchantment with flash. It comes to play with X counters, and all your spells and all your sources deal X more damage. And it ended up being, I think, a pretty good use for firebending mana and just a strong card for like 6 or 7 mana. Especially, I really liked it with the Warden that you pay 3 to ping for 1. That was a pretty nice little combo. You could just pay 3 to ping them for 5 or whatever. And we were pretty down on the card because historically, the big red crazy enchantments are all terrible. Like average grade, probably about an F, maybe a D. This was like a C plus B minus, in the right deck, maybe just a B. And so it ended up being, I think we were a little low on that as a result.
We actually did. I think we have some we sometimes struggle with what were the most underrated cards. Sometimes we frame that as coming out of the set review, but there's even cards, to this day that I'm kind of like, the one that jumps out to me, Luis, it took me a little while to get on the ship, as it were, is the Fire Nation warship. The reach that when it dies, it makes a clue. A card's actually fine.
Yeah,
right?
the 3 mana 4/4. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I ended up playing that card a pretty good amount, I'd say at the end.
I did too. It's because, there's a certain, it's not written on the card. Like Laux used to call it keyword crappy, which is like, you want it to die. Like if it trades for any card in any situation, you're happy because you're getting a card back out of it. And it was like a late pick. And, it's one of those, like, if you can just get something out of it, you're happy. And I was always happy to throw that card, Fire Nation Worship as a blocker. It's just like, yeah, kill it, please. Do something with it. Like, use a combat trick, trade it for a creature, burn spell it, whatever you want to do. I'm happy with the result because that card I didn't have to struggle to get in my deck. It's my 23rd card or my 20th card or whatever. And, and I'm fine to let it go. And it really had that vibe. And the fact that it had reach really did make it like a dang decent blocker. Like it's just, they have to deal with it at some point. And of course, being, immune to sorcery speed removal is nice too.
I also liked it with Master Paku as a way to tap him.
Oh yeah. That's great. That's really good. It's weird because this card, I don't know, maybe it's just my perception of it. It's one of my favorite cards in the set. It's Lost Days. I know people know it's good. It's not like, there's some secret.
Yeah, this one is not super secret. I agree.
But it's like, dang, man, I still see it 6th pick. And I'm just like, this card, like this is one of the better removal spells we've had, like the way that it's positioned in the set. And I still just always felt like when I was willing to first pick it or second pick it and be pretty happy with it. I viewed it in some ways as my late game. Like if I could get to 2 or 3 of these, like that was enough for me to usually propel myself to a victory once I got to the 5 mana. And I still picked it up like 6th, 7th pick. And I'm just, every once in a while I would wheel. And I just felt, I don't know. I just always had this feeling in the back of my head like it wasn't being properly respected. One card early in the format was Yip Yip. That ended up being a pretty dang good performer early. I think it evened out maybe a little bit later in the format, but it mostly just looked like another kind of fill-in, pump spell or whatever, but it did really well early in the format. Like that thing was responsible for a lot of wins.
Yeah. Yip Yip was the combination of 1 mana to win a combat, in a close combat plus just finishing your opponent by something was a 1 mana deal 6. Mm-hmm. It was pretty good.
And then the other one was Deadly Precision. It looked like the weird cousin of the good black removal spell, but it ended up being like right there. It's basically just one of the good black removal spells.
Well, one of the things that can happen, even if you don't have like a dedicated sacrifice deck or it doesn't come together that often, I know black-white was supposed to be that, there still are these like vestigial like enablers for it that, Corrupt Court Official, you'll just play in your black deck and you'll play Deadly Precision and it'll work out pretty well, even if you're not like a dedicated sacrifice deck.
Right. And the alternate cost means that you have that.
Yeah. The buyout of 5 mana means you're not really going to get stuck holding the bag there that often. Sometimes it can still end up being kind of awkward.
Right. What were some of the most controversial or talked about cards over the course of
the monocolor incentives were interesting. I thought they pulled them off pretty well. Really only the red one I think was bad. I think all the rest of them were actually pretty legit. So we had Waterbending Scroll, just one of my favorite cards in the set.
Right.
Cat Gator in like a mono black or near mono black deck was pretty strong. And I think that like the Gather the White Lotus was actually just a really good card, especially since white played really nicely as a almost monocolor deck. So I think that these cards were interesting, and they at least spurred some debate of like, okay, should you actually be monocolored, or what are you trying to do with these? And then there was also the shrines. The shrines were a big topic of discussion because they obviously meant to be good. They're meant to be oh, look, you can draft the Shrines deck. And then the reality of the situation was you should not draft the Shrines deck. So it's kind of interesting to see how that all like ended up playing out.
Yeah, it's weird. They went low on them. The goalposts are so hard to reach, right? When it comes to shrines, especially when you need to get to like 4 colors or something, at least 3 to really make them, go. And it's like, as long as they're not like just straight up good enough on their own, I mean, you can kind of go nuts with shrines, like you don't have to hold back. And it felt like they held back quite a bit. And it's interesting that they actually did put the mana fixing in place in the set so that you could do the shrines deck, but they just didn't make the shrines quite worth it.
I think part of the problem was the blue shrine was good. Draw a card, sure. Like that is a thing you want in this effect. And the black shrine I actually thought was interesting because that was 1 mana and you could end up, draining them out by spamming a bunch of shrines. But I think the biggest problem for me was that the green and white shrines, they just did nothing for your board.
Right.
The white one could if you had a board. It was plus muscle and countered all your creatures. But if you didn't have a board, it didn't help. The red one was also good. It makes the prowess monks. But searching for lands, you don't really need to do that more than once. And even the first time, you'd almost rather just have something that affects the board instead. So I think that the shrines deck basically needed 2 of the shrines to be a little better, I feel like.
Yeah. I did play the white shrine once, but it was just to pump up my squad. I just had like a token stack and it was totally good in that context, which is kind of funny. What was your favorite artwork from the set?
Aang's Iceberg by Matteo Bassini. I just thought it
super
really,
sweet. You can see
really
Aang
cool
in there, right? If you look really close, his little shadow.
It's neat.
That's really cool. I picked, I just went with my heart. I was looking through and I knew which one I wanted from the start, but then I was like, maybe I should just look again in case there's like some really great, like art put in here. But I just went back to what my, like the thing I'll remember about this set, which is Aang, the Last Airbender, the uncommon one by Ueko. I don't know if this is actually just from the show directly or not, because it has that kind of cartoon vibe to it, where he's flying and smiling and stuff. But that to me that's the card I will remember from this set the most. And I think it captured the character and his vibe really, really well. It's a very simple artwork. Like there's nothing fancy about it, but when I see that, it makes me smile and it makes me think of the show. And it also makes me think of like Aang in his purest form, right? That this is him before he has to go through all this stuff. And I really appreciate that they didn't overdo that and just kept it simple. Cause it is kind of interesting, Luis. I don't know if you've ever looked, but Glider Staff has artwork that's very similar to Aang the Last Airbender. It's basically him just flying.
Oh, that's his staff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. I'm just saying the artwork though, right?
Yeah.
Like it's him flying the thing and he's smiling and he's doing the same in both. It feels like the artwork description was very similar for both, but the Aang the Last Airbender one to me really captures the vibe. Let's see. What were your favorite build around cards in this set?
I think for me, my favorite for sure was Waterbending Scroll. I just really liked it. If you got 2 of those, you could just go nuts. Just take as many Lost Days and Watery Grasps and Fabled Fortune Tellers, and then just have 2 Waterbending Scrolls and just start to just attrition your opponent out. Iroh Grand Lotus is also really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the best. That's one of the most fun build arounds that we've had. One card I really like to build around too was Accumulate Wisdom. I would, go harder for the lessons deck and include maybe a couple of the fringe lessons in there to try to get that off. Cause man, when you played Accumulate Wisdom, it's a kind of a sucker's version of Iroh Grand Lotus, but it worked. I mean, you put 3 cards in your hand and that's a big boost. And it was also fun to build around, from a managing the lessons standpoint. And then of course, worth noting is not the shrines, right? Cause that would be the obvious, what's your favorite build arounds? If you showed me the set, I would assume that you and I would both be like shrines. Like that was super cool. But no. Which card still looks good when you read it, but just doesn't really see play?
Honestly, for me, it's Cycle of Renewal.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since this kind of card is good, a 3-mana ramp spell. But I thought this being a lesson, this having a little synergy with Earthbending, because you could sack a 1/1 Earthbent land and get it back, for an extra bit of value. And the lessons deck could be 4 colors and all of that would make this good enough. And then it's just not. And I remember when Hera, which was basically the same card, back in Tempest and then in Invasion was really, really good. And it's just not good anymore. And it breaks my heart. Cycle of Renewal. Not good. And
it's even a better version. Like this is the new template where it's not an additional cost to sack the land. And, and it still fell flat. One card for me was Vengeful Villagers. Not an ally. And that really hurt it, because you could see it seeing some play in the, more aggressive, red, white allies deck or whatever. But the fact that it wasn't, and its, stats are a little low, it's a little, kind of geared towards aggression, only really left it out in the cold. The other card that I'm like, this card seems like it could be good, and it's just like, maybe just a step too slow, was Ember Island Production, the clone where, it kind of oftentimes upgrades the thing you're cloning or maybe downgrades theirs, but you can clone anything, and get the ETBs and get all the stuff. But I don't know, probably just because it's 5 mana, a little bit too slow.
There's some cool stuff you can do with it. Cloning the Earth King was incredible because
it made it.
I think I talked about it once. Right? Well, you would end up with another 2/2 or another 4/4 plus another 4/4. So you get 2 4/4s out of the deal. And when a 4/4 attacks, you'd get 2 lands because now you had 2 Earth Kings in play.
Yeah. So, and if you attacked with 2 of them, that's I did some really cool stuff with it. But whenever I picked it, I was always like, I still like the card, but this is kind of interesting question for this. Was this a Prince or a Pauper set? Because the rares were no joke in this set.
But I think it was a Prince set ultimately.
Good answers. Yeah, I think so too. If to the extent that that matters in the current day and age, yes, there were answers for these cards, but my God, the bombs were insane, especially the gold ones.
Yeah. Look, there were answers. This isn't the worst set for that ever, but I think that one of the biggest complaints people had, and I think it was legit, was that the rares were just out of control, and especially in sealed.
We should mention sealed.
I ended up not enjoying Avatar sealed that much, to be honest. I like the draft plenty. Sealed, not so good though.
I won 3 boxes in the win a box. What was it, last weekend or a weekend, maybe 2 weeks
I just didn't
ago?
play anymore. I was just, I
know.
Take it.
That's why I brought it up, because after you and I played those other ones, they were so miserable, and it just felt like such a crapshoot to play them. But I just couldn't help myself. I had a little extra time, and I'm like, all right. I'll subject myself to the torture of Airbender sealed. But I somehow ran hot and did a full run where I got 2 boxes and then got really close to the second box at another. But those are the ones where if you get to 6 wins, you get a box anyway. But that's a good litmus test for if it's Prince or Pauper. It's really princely set in that regard. It's a bad card, but I love it anyway for you. For me, it was actually Cycle of Renewal. I never quite let go of the dream of being in green and being able to do all the things. I stopped playing it at some point, but when I see it in a pack, I still look at it like Harrow, I'm still like, you're still beautiful to me, Cycle of Renewal, even though I'm not going to take you and I'm going to take some, boring ally or whatever over it. Did you have any cards like that, Luis?
I mean, for me, it was Ember Island Production because I was always on the lookout for you copy cards that care about their stats, and you can end up with doing some cool stuff with it, or cards that stacked well, like copying Master Paku and having 2 of them out to mill them out quickly was pretty cool. But I do think that the card wasn't that great.
What's the I literally never win with it, but it always seems to beat me card for you?
For me, it was honestly Wandering Musicians. This is the common 2/5 that when it attacks, all your creatures get +1/+0.
You were taking that card?
I just lost to it a lot more often than I won with it. Yeah,
oh, man, I turned that guy sideways on.
No, I know it's a fine card. It just happened to beat me a lot more.
I mentioned How to Start a Riot is definitely one for that.
Yeah, that's a good one.
But another one is Fire Lord Azula, the one that copies your spells when it's attacking. Never. I mean, I tried it early, and then pretty quickly was like that color trio doesn't really come together that much, and it was just too fragile. But oh my God, I got absolutely slayed by that card multiple times, and even recently, like where people attack with it, and I'm like, okay, just don't have a removal spell, and it's like Lost Days 2-year thing. I'm like, no, and they're just getting 4 or 5 mana bonuses plus extra cards coming off of Fire Lord Azula. I was never able to make that happen. All right. What was my opponent played this, so now I must win or quit Magic forever card for you?
So Number one is Sozin's Comet. I had someone cast this against me and like not use the mana for all that much. And it was just, like I would definitely be Sozin's Comet, but at a common level, and this is a card I did lose to sometimes, of course, was Daily Indoctrination. There's nothing like the thrill of them casting it on your hand and you not having like a permit to discard.
So good.
Like, the card was just really bad. So I always was like, oh, I got to beat them if they played this. But Sozin's Comet was like the actual answer.
For me, it was Waterbender Ascension, which I did have played against me multiple times this format. I don't know why. I mean, one person, I think they beat me too. I think they started with the Tiger Seal and then played Waterbender Ascension, and I'm pretty sure I lost that game. So I don't know if I should really still be here at this point, because that's pretty embarrassing. But yeah, for me, nothing.
I lost Waterbender Ascension once.
But my opponent went Tiger Seal Waterbender Ascension, and I lost. And you don't take advantage to make fun of me for like even half a second. Like, how do I still
like
have
Tiger Seal.
I know, but you're way too high on that. That card sucks. Come on.
Well, it's good in the right deck, is all.
Yeah,
it's good as Waterbending Scroll.
What about Waterbender Ascension? I mean, come on.
Well, see, the thing about Waterbender Ascension is if you get too far behind, it will kill you. Like
that is true, and that did happen.
Yeah. So I think that it's not just like a terrible card. It is a bad card, but it has at least the dream of being good. Whereas something like Sozin's Comet, it's like the hoops you have to jump through to make that card good is kind of unreal.
We needed
There's
fireball.
Nothing like your opponent foretelling, and you're like, oh, okay. I guess so.
Yeah. Next up is the groan test. What was the biggest groan test in this set? For me, it was like not even close. What was yours?
For me, it was like one of the legends. So Legend of Roku, totally. Legend of Yang Chen, Legend of Kuruk, whatever. Not just because they were good, but because you also lost over like 3 turns. You didn't lose right away.
Yeah,
but you
Legend of Kuruk is good
almost
for that.
all the time. They go Legend of Kuruk. It's like they technically didn't add to the board this turn, and you just like do your thing. Next one, they just cast another Preordain. And of course, because they've just cast 2 Preordains, they probably can answer the things you haven't played. Then they flip it, and it's just like you're gonna lose to these cards, but it will take you a little while, which I think is actually worse.
That is when you know it's coming is worse. This one though, oh my god. Abandoned Air Temple.
Yeah, that's
like
a
how
good
many
one,
times do you have like a reasonable board state, and then they just play their land for the turn, and you're like, yeah, okay, so we're good, and then you double check, and it's like, oh no, and they just activate it, and then on their turn activate it, and you're just so far behind, or they play it in attack with everything, and you're like, but wait a minute, like I have a counter spell, or I have a removal spell, I have something, and it's just a stupid land that you can't touch, and then they destroy you with it. I mean, that seriously for limited, outside of the creature lands, Abandoned Air Temple has to be one of the best limited lands we've had, right? Like of all time.
Oh yeah. I put this in the cube and it's good.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, also the other thing we're not talking about is the fact that it asks effectively literally nothing of you. Like it just not even tapped, most of the time. So it's just, one of those cards that's effectively free and can straight up win you the game in certain board states. Like that's a lot. That's a lot from a land. Luis, what cards do you have your eye on for cube, or even have you just straight up put into your cube?
Yeah, it's been long enough that I actually have a good sense. So Legend of Kuruk is actually a pretty good one. And I had a funny pick. Let's say you're a generic blue control deck, blue mid-range deck. Are you taking Legend of Kuruk or Jace the Mind Sculptor? Oh,
I think I would take Legend at this point.
Yeah.
I really like Jace, and I'm a old school Jace fan, but yeah, it does die a lot. And if it there's just too many board positions where you go Jace Brainstorm and it's dead. And this just, is much more difficult permanent to interact with. And gives you a big fat.
That was, I think on an empty board, the Jace is more powerful, but this is so much harder to kill. So yeah, I ended up taking that and generally being happy with it. I think Legend of Kuruk is quite strong. Aang Swift Savior is pretty cool. That's the blue-white flash Aang, which plays a little like a weird spell queller, but a little weaker on that side because they can just play the card again. But it also can, venture their creature out of the board for at least temporarily if they're attacking you. And then flipping it is actually pretty relevant. So it's like kind of enough stuff pulled together.
That's cool.
That it's going to stick around for now. It's not one of the better cards. And then Wan Shi Tong Librarian is another fun one. This is the Mythic Wan Shi Tong, the X blue. Actually, the both are mythic, I think. There's the 5-mana 4/4 flyer that tucks a card and makes 2 spirits, and I think that card is good enough for cube.
Is that one of the like technically in the set but not really
Yeah,
cards?
that's not one of the fake cards. And then there's this one, which is the X blue 1/1 that get, the Hydroid Crisis kind of deal.
And this is the one that gets counters when they search their library, right?
Right. So mostly what you're doing is playing this for like 5 or 6 mana, something like that, is just a good flash flying threat. But I had a game where I cast it on turn 2 in response to them playing their fetch. I was on the play. I go land, go. They go land, go. I go land, go. They go turn 2, land, crack a fetch, and I just cast it in response. 2 mana, 2/2 flying flash, draw a card, and then has text while it's in play. So
yeah, because I have it in my current powered cube list. It's also on the arena one right now. And yeah, it makes you look for something that you don't normally, which is, is my opponent going to search their library? But like, turns out that happens a lot. Like tutors and fetches and stuff are really common plays in that style of cube. So Wan Chi Tong, especially if you can make it like into a decent blocker or threat or something like, where it's at least like a 3/3. Yeah, they have to kill it. Like it gets really annoying for the opponent for sure. And most of the time they don't know about that last clause, by the way. Like they'll crack a fetch and then like hover over your card. Like, oh, dang it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it has enough different things that are cool. One thing that I am trying, which I don't think is going to work out, unfortunately, is Fire Nation Occupation. So this is another.
I got destroyed by that card yesterday.
Yeah. So this is 2 and a black enchantment. This is also not in the real set. 2 and a black enchantment makes a 2/2 Firebender. And then whenever you play a spell during your opponent's turn, you make another one. And the idea is like you play this and then you force a will their next play, or you cast Fatal Push and you just like make a stream of 2/2s. I just haven't had it really work out, which is unfortunate. It looks cool.
What like, is it because like if it was blue, it would be amazing? Like, is it just in the wrong color?
It would be better if it was blue. I think it's because just cube's powerful. How many creatures would you have to make off this to consider it good? You need 3. Like
three, like the first one and then 2 extras. Yeah.
Yes. Like you need to play this, get a creature on their turn, then get a creature on their next turn as well. And that's like to make this as good as like a card you would choose to play in cube. If you make 2 creatures off it, it's just not good enough.
Right.
And
yeah,
I think one of the problems I have with the design is that the firebending from the firebenders doesn't really help you play spells on their turn. So like it feels like that should work together in some way, and it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, I think that I'm particularly scared of this card just because it's good against the type of decks that I play. Like if it's an enchantment, so it's kind of difficult to deal with, and then they just can keep passing the turn back, and it's like they're going to build up this army over time. What was the most frustrating bad card, air quotes, to lose to, or maybe a card that you won't miss playing against or that just annoyed you? I had a rather embarrassing loss a couple of days ago. I lost to the Walls of Ba Sing Se.
How did that happen?
They played it, and I had removal that wanted to destroy. And I could not.
But they had enough time to play it and have it be relevant and all that?
We had a mostly stalled out board, and all of a sudden, I couldn't kill any of their stuff. And it just like, I never found an answer for it. And I just got ground down by the stupid thing. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say I was frustrated, but I was just kind of laughing. I was just like, am I seriously about to lose? And I did. I lost the game to the Walls. What about you?
For me, it was Shrines. It's because I didn't think they were good, but sometimes it would work out. Like you can lose to it, and I have, and it was just like, no, these aren't good. Don't you know this? Like I always found that to be a little bit annoying.
What was the bombiest bomb? What was the card you wanted to open the most?
I mean, by the numbers, the Rise of Sozin was definitely the best card. I like Legend of Kuruk. That card is just great. I really enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, Fire Nation Drill's on the list too, but it is interesting because I think you could make an argument for Legend of Kuruk because it's blue. It's not quite on the power level of Rise of Sozin or Fire Nation Drill. It's like maybe half a notch below. But man, starting off in blue, I mean, it's the best blue card in the set. So, that's not a bad place to be where, Rise of Sozin and Fire Nation Drill are amazing cards despite the fact that they're in black, right?
Right.
They're fighting that for, so, I wouldn't be surprised, if Legend of Kuruk is a better open, even if it's a slightly worse card. I wonder if your deck power on average is just higher if you start off with pack one, pick one Legend of Kuruk versus Rise of Sozin or Fire Nation Drill.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Best common for each color. I'm going to go down the list here, Luis. For white, it was Path of Redemption and Compassionate Healer. They were actually tied. I would give it to Path to Redemption. Would you give it to the Healer or the Path?
I think the Path, it was the card you wanted a little bit more, I would say.
A little harder to replace. Blue was Lost Days, my boy. Black was Sold Out and Deadly Precision, more or less tied. And then right there with them, one of my favorites, Corrupt Court Official, was right there too. Works really well with Deadly Precision. It's fine in its own right. I like Sold Out still. Like Exile mattered, Instant Speed mattered, but Deadly Precision's flexibility was really nice too.
Yeah, it was a little bit harder to use, but it was better when you did it, when you got it lined up, for sure.
Red was Firebending Lesson, not close, and green was interesting. It was Ostrich Horse, but the second one was Badger Mole. And I think I value Badger Mole a little higher. It's hard to do that because it's 5 mana, but it was a legit, we jokingly called it Grave Titan in the set review, but like it was good, man. Like that card came down and the trample mattered, the bodies mattered. It was big. I was continually impressed with Badger Mole, even though I rarely actually played it myself.
Yeah, I think that it did more work than you thought. It's funny when one of those like kind of expensive cards ends up actually being good enough, because we often are not that high on them, but some of them do differentiate themselves, and that was one of them. It
happens very infrequently, but when it does, Badger Mole, we got to give you props. Next up, what was the mythic uncommon for this set? It's our boy.
It's got to be the Submersible.
Invasion Submersible. Close. So insanely good. And, this is another one that I think is really interesting, because when you look at it, it doesn't have any synergies, right? Like this set doesn't care about artifacts. It doesn't care about vehicles. It's not an ally. It's not a lesson. It just has none of the things that this set cares about. And yet it still is the mythic uncommon for the set. That's just raw power, right? I mean, that is just, the way it played out in most scenarios was more or less, it was a 3/3 mana war. And that's really good.
Yeah. And it did everything you wanted it to do, really. Like, I think it was just a really strong card, like in a card type that already is very strong to begin with.
Exactly. And again, yeah, blue. What's the worst card in the set? The biggest blank, the most last picked. Is it Sozin's Comet?
I mean, Elemental Teachings, has
is that the green? Is that the 4 and a green?
Yeah, the 4 and a green to go get some lands sort of deal.
That's a great choice. That's a great choice.
I mean, there's a bunch of bonus sheet cards that are just abysmal. That are all Fs,
I always leave those off. I mean, to be clear, technically the best card in the set was Noxious Gearhulk, by the way. But I wanted to keep to the cards that are actually, in the set. Elemental Teachings. Elemental Teachings is like a little bit of an insult, right? It's like, it's like when the used car dealer comes out and is like, how about $30,000 for this car that's worth 10, and you're like, hey, come on, I'm not dumb. Like you got, work with me here. Right. And when the design team throws us the Elemental Teachings, it's a little like, hey, come on. I don't want a mana ramp starting at 5 here.
Yeah. It's just like, what's going on with this? What are they trying to do? It's really hard to say,
Luis, what was the most begrudgingly playable card?
My vote was Geyser Leaper. It's the 5 mana 4/3 flyer.
That's like perfect, dude.
Saw it plenty on camera at the Worlds.
Yeah.
I actually think the Land Cyclers fall into this category too. I would frequently play a Land Cycler when I, just had had a deck where it's like, okay, I can play one more thing, or I can play two of them and like maybe cut one land or something.
Yeah.
But you would just cast them and you just feel that they were so mediocre. You can feel the mediocrity just seeping through as you play the card. And sometimes you attack them with Giant Koi and it works out all right.
Yeah, Giant Koi was the one that I'm like, okay, I kind of like you. Geyser Leaper's perfect though, because the thing that brought it from not playable to right up to begrudging is that it's an ally. You're like, okay, fine, you got me. Is there a card you will miss drafting? For me, there's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I really liked the blue commons in the set. Like I loved the curve. Like, you know, going Forecasting Fortune Teller into Messenger Hawk was so satisfying to me. And then like a late game with Lost Days, obviously the Submersible, because it's my type of card and they made it just absurd in this set. And then, man, Waterbending Scroll, dude. That card was fun.
Waterbending Scroll.
Yeah. I had the scenario that you described a few minutes ago where I had two of them going and eventually got them into free mode. And it was just like, you know, I'm just flooding my hand with cards. You know, you start doing library checks at some point because you're going to draw that many cards. I mean, that was cool. And I have to say, you know, you talked about the mono colored payoffs and stuff. Really nice work with those, getting into that middle ground where you didn't disregard them entirely if you weren't either monocolored or like heavily in that favor. You know, if you were mostly white, you could play Gather. Like even if it made three things and scryed you, like that was pretty good. And you know, if I had 4 islands out at some point with my Waterbending Scroll, I wasn't like, I was like, this thing sucks, you know?
Yeah. I think that they, like Cat Gator dealing 4 damage was still pretty good.
And being a lifelinker, like that really could stabilize the board for you.
Yeah.
What card will you miss drafting?
I think overall, probably it's just tough. Iroh, Grand Lotus, and Waterbending Scroll are 2 cards I mentioned a lot here because they just are both extremely fun. Like they're exactly what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to miss drafting either of them.
And with that in mind, what was the LSV-est card and the Martialist card?
I think Waterbending Lesson for me, just because it's like 4
it's just
mana
slow
or
enough.
6 mana. It doesn't affect the board. It's a lesson. It draws cards. It kind of does a lot of the things that I enjoy doing.
It is the dirtiest for sure. For me, okay, obviously Submersible, you know, would check that box, but Submersible was actually just too good to make it the Martialist card. So the one that epitomizes my approach was Spirit Water Revival. the 2 and the blue 1 draw 2, but you could like super waterbend kick it to do a one-sided time spot, like shuffle everything in, draw 7 extra cards, and you don't shuffle in your hand and you don't have a maximum hand size for the rest of the game. You know, I often talk about inevitability, and that's a big focus for me when I'm playing. There's some sets that aren't really geared that way, but this one is, and that's what I want. I want inevitability, and Spirit Water Revival is like a game plan in one card, right? Because if you just survive and get to fire this off without dying in the next turn or whatever, you're going to have a pretty unassailable advantage over your opponent. I mean, you get to shuffle your graveyard in, and then all the lands that you've played up until that point aren't in your library. So now the cards you draw are more spell dense than they would have been like at the beginning of the game. And you have no maximum hand size, so you don't have to give up anything to do it. It's just a question of getting to that point and surviving that turn cycle, because then if you get to untap, it's usually pretty easy to do it. I didn't really have a soapboxy card, right?
No, we were talking about it, and it's like, I mean, it helped that the best vehicle in the set was the Submersible. So,
I know.
You know,
I know.
They kind of snuck that one by you, but no, there wasn't anything like too soapboxy.
They
like
bribed me outright. I mean, they were just like, look, we'll make it into a mana war. I'm like, you know what? Vehicles are pretty cool, actually. What card do you still have to read when it's cast against you?
Oh, Iroh Tea Master. That's the red white one that like you know, gives them a permanent that makes a thing, and it has some +1/+1 counters,
And there's like a food randomly thrown in there.
and it makes a food. Like, what a weird card.
That is a very weird card for me. And this was only cast against me a couple of times, but it was Secret of Bloodletting, the blue card, and you can water bend for like 1 million. Yeah, I was always like, okay, you're going to play this, but I can't remember what the not take over your whole turn version is. And it's just like, I think they only take over combat or whatever. All right, big question, big stuff at the end here, Luis. From a design and development aspect, how did this set fare? How were the mechanics? What were some of the wins and the losses? And the mechanics, they actually went pretty deep on this set. There's the 4 bendings, and then sagas were here. Lessons were a big part of it. Allies were a big part of it. There was a little bit of exhaust. There was clues. And of course, there was the shrines.
Well, as we said in the Limmies, the lessons, or sorry, not lessons, the fire bending and water bending, earth bending, air bending, the bendings were, I think, really good. I think they were really well designed because they were not only each individually well designed, but they also formed a cohesive whole while only being connected by name. Like that they did have to find these mechanics that aren't going to be actually similar despite having kind of the same aegis of bending. And they played out really smoothly. I think the best one is water bending. I think it just is a really satisfying mechanic, but all of them have cool stuff. Like they feel, I hate to continue harping on Spider-Man, but comparing this set to Spider-Man, this set feels from a development standpoint like there was significant development work put into it. The rough edges are smoothed out. That's the difference. Is you can look at 2 different sets and they might be kind of similar in terms of like the net result, like these are both pretty fun, or they both have some cool cards, but you can tell the difference between a set that has that extra time and care put into it, and stuff like the Spider-Man cards being templated basically wrong, like not how they template them now, to the mechanics in Avatar feeling like they really took a lot of work and effort to line up right. Like, it's so easy to get earthbending wrong and have it be like, oh, if your land gets killed, you don't get it back. But then they put that in and even included exile. And it was just like, this just plays out the way you want it. In fact, for a lot of these things, the way you can tell that something is well done is that you don't even think about it. You don't feel those pain points. It just plays out smoothly. It plays out the way you want. And that is how I feel a lot of these bending cards play out. Like fire bendings persist through all the phases, and then there's a couple of cards that let you keep it the whole turn, and that's a cool thing too. So, because
there was a world where one of these bendings just flopped, right? I mean, I would have actually predicted that.
And they even picked for airbending a mechanic that you don't want to see like over and over and over again. Like there's not a common creature that when it attacks airbends, because that would be really annoying. But as it fits perfectly into the world, which you now know because you watched Avatar, airbending is not very common. There's not a lot of it. And that was reflected in this. And they even picked a mechanic that wouldn't actually be great to show up in like mass quantities. Whereas like firebending and earthbending, I feel like they did a ton of, and waterbending and all that. And that works out just totally fine.
What about the sagas, lessons,
so
allies?
I look at so let's start with lessons, because lessons was another one. It was funny when I was first looking at cards on the spoiler, I remember being kind of confused, being like, wait, I don't get it. There's our lessons, but how do you get them? There's no learn cards, and it just, as it turns out, there's no learn cards because these are the lessons have no mechanical interaction except for on the cards that specifically call them out. It's not like the whole theme in Strixhaven where they live in your sideboard. So, but lessons just played out perfectly in that it's super flavorful. It fits very nicely. The whole show is about learning lessons. And it also, the cards that they had synergized with lessons, I think played out pretty smoothly the way you wanted them to. So it ended up being a pretty cool, it shows you how much of a hook though that can be, despite it not being a mechanic that had a specific ability attached to it. Like lessons did not intrinsically do anything, but uniting them all under the aegis of lessons did I think work out pretty well, and I liked how it played out. So I thought lessons were very cool. Sagas and exhaust and like clues aren't really Avatar specific. Like
no, but what did you think about them sprinkling in stuff like that?
Well, what I was going to say is that they fit nicely, and I would expect them to show up at a decent amount of in a decent amount of sets and kind of do the same. Like Exhaust, I think we could see it basically every time now, and I think it
Mhm.
would be sweet. Like it's just a cool way to put an ability on a card, like for a draw card on a creature. Like you don't want to do it every turn, or that's a whole engine. But putting it on it once, yeah, that's pretty neat. Maybe throw in some other effect too, and it's
Mhm.
just here's your one time ultimate. Ultimates are fun. People like when their characters get to do that. So I think Exhaust's great. I will continue to think it's great when it shows up. Sagas, I think, yeah, they paid the complexity cost on Sagas when they introduced it. Obviously, they still pay that cost because people still show up and read them and they're like trying to figure them out. But overall, I think that that Sagas play pretty well, and I don't mind seeing them. Um, and then clues are just great too. So these are all just like kind of generic evergreen mechanics that show up from time to time and I think play well, but I think they did work out really well here. I like how that actually ended up playing out.
Yeah, I think it's one of the hallmarks of this set are the mechanics and how they played out. I talked about it at the front, but if I'm looking at how to translate things from a different IP into Magic and looking at the bending, admittedly somewhat straightforward in terms of like, okay, we're going to match these up with a color and kind of go with that. That part, I think they probably sorted out pretty quickly, but actually getting the details right on these, making them evocative of what happens on the show, and then also making them relevant power level wise for limited is a complicated and difficult problem for sure. And, Luis and I will call this out when we see it, which is you can tell when there's been multiple iterations on a card or mechanic where it's like, there's no way this started at that number, or this clause was added in because they saw an issue and they wanted to fix it. And all four of the bendings just have those hallmarks all over them. Like you mentioned, the exile thing on earthbending, stuff like that, getting the cost right on airbending, like could have cost 1 or 3 to bring it back. Both 2 ended up being the spot where they landed. What are the things that can help with water bending? Is it just your creatures? That kind of stuff. And they really did a good job. I think it's, to the level of being great as a template for what to do, which is about the biggest compliment I think you can give to that. As a format, what did it teach you? Or, it's maybe something that made you better at limited or some takeaways from it. I know for me, I was not against Universes Beyond before this. I know a lot of people really hate it, and I felt pretty neutral about it. The IP isn't really what draws me to play anyway. So I kind of didn't care about Universes Beyond as long as we didn't have stuff like with Spider-Man where it just made it so much harder to follow what was going on and it felt like halfway done and all that. Like that to me is its own problem, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Universes Beyond necessarily. But this set, yeah, maybe Universes Beyond is just sweet.
I think it's good when done well and bad when done poorly, just like a lot of things.
Like, why do I need all these Magic IPs if there's just really great ones out there? I would say the one downside is that, like, had I not watched the show, I would feel quite a bit differently. I'd feel similarly to how I did about Final Fantasy, which is that, it's one of my favorite sets of the year. It's one of the best limited sets we've had. So pretty dang good, but I'm not really connected to the characters. And I still don't really know if they nailed the flavor or not. I kind of assume they did, but I don't know. But with this one, I actually do. Does it mean that I need to do deep dives into every IP? I don't want to have
enjoy
to watch.
it, right? You don't want to do that.
Maybe the argument against, but to me, this really did at least open my eyes to what is potentially there with Universes Beyond. And as I mentioned in the Limmy's, I view it as kind of a unique thing, right? It's a very difficult thing to explain to somebody who either doesn't play Magic or hasn't watched Airbender to know both of those and how they come together and what a beautiful expression of both of those things this set ended up being. It is really difficult to convey that. It's kind of a if you know kind of thing with Magic and the rules and the gameplay and all of the different things that happen in it. But I think that it's a really special, cool way to express something. And I think that this is the best version of that I've seen so far.
As far as what this format taught me, it was a pretty straightforward format.
It was.
It certainly made me reevaluate what how good ramp is, because both cycle of renewal and shared routes were just really unimpressive.
Fine. Yeah.
And that stood out to me a little bit, because it's like, oh, I would have thought both those cards would be pretty good, or at least decent, and they were just not kind of not. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me was kind of the same as you, which is that the Universes Beyond, when done well, can be really, really sweet, and this was it was really, really sweet.
What grade would you give Avatar: The Last Airbender?
I would give it an A. I just
Same.
think it's just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to be super strict about everything, I would say the limited formats like a B plus or an A minus, something like that. But as a set, which is how we grade these things, I give Avatar an A.
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite sets.
That's my experience with the set. Like, it's an A.
Yep.
I agree that it would honestly just be a B. I'm not Paul. Paul really hates this set. We should have had him on for the Limmies. He had a good point, though. Of course, he tried to get Paul on, and he was too busy.
He's big timed us like 4 times in a row. Like, I just can't get him anymore.
The problem was we gave him the Limmy already, so like he has no
so he
incentive to.
Oh my! I didn't think about that. We should have we should have not given it to him and said, you only filled in for 2 months in 2025. Maybe if you stop big timing us, then we'll get you back on. You don't think he would have given it an A, huh?
Dude, he would give it like an F. He hates it.
Yeah. Well, we both gave it an A, but we're fanboys. What was your favorite card of the format?
End of the day, Iroh Grand Lotus. And again, this also, just to play into it a little bit, the fact that I just like the character Iroh is just a big part of that.
Totally.
Nothing wrong with that,
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the opposite for me, because I don't like this part of the show, but I really like the card, which is Lost Days.
Yeah, that's when everyone was split, right? When like Momo was lost and like
it's when they captured Appa too. Like he had a rough run there in the middle. But I love Lost Days. It epitomizes at common, by the way. I went real simple here, but it epitomizes much of the way that I like to play Magic and the inevitability that you get. I like it that it gives you a clue, right? Not just that it gives you a card, but it's a clue token, right? It's slow. It makes you wait for it. It makes you pay. It maybe has another use on the battlefield, for water bending or sacking or something like that. And that's a subtle touch, versus, of course I like the removal spell that is a +1 on cards or whatever, but I like that it's kind of expensive. I like that it gives you a clue and not just a straight up card. This to me hits that sweet spot. And I'll really miss playing Lost Days. It's going to go down as one of my favorite removal spells ever, for sure. Bye-bye, Last Airbender. This is a tough one to say goodbye to, for sure. But I will say it has been out for a long time. When the Vintage Cube came out, I jumped right on it. I have drafted this set tons of times, and I'm totally good with, whatever, with Lorwyn Eclipsed or playing Cube for a while or whatever. So we had a really good one
to play Cube for a while.
Yeah. you decided you're going to try out this Cube thing everybody's been talking about. But anyway, really great stuff for Avatar. And it is a little sad to see it go, even if it is kind of time for it to go. Let's call it there, Luis. If you want to find us on social media, Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. Pretty much everywhere. If you want to check out the archive of our podcast, plus everything, links to Luis's YouTube channel, etc. It's all at lrcast.com. Paul's YouTube channel's there for now. You can we also want to say thank you to our Patreon supporters, as well as Ultimate Guard for their support of the show. And bye-bye, Last Airbender. We had a great run, and hopefully they'll bring it back on Arena sometime soon. We'll see you next week.
Marshall, I got to feel like we just got a big accomplishment. I told you about this. We made it through winter break. It was I
don't know how you survived it, dude.
It was one of those things where it's like, it felt like everything just kind of went wrong at the same time. It's like, all 6 of us got norovirus. We had 3 ER trips for different things. Like, everyone's fine now, but we just like it took a lot to kind of get through all this. And it's so funny because like I'm now like back to work, and it's like I'd never in my life realize how much I would be like, oh, finally, time to get back to work. But you know, that's just how it can be. The like something like winter break is both like in some ways the most fun part of the year, but in some ways most definitely not, or at least like one of the harder parts of the year in terms of just effort. And I think a lot of parents can probably understand that, like making it through does feel like an accomplishment.